The delivery room had fallen silent for just a moment after Isabella's first cry. 7 minutes later, her sister Isabel entered the world. The nurses wrapped the identical baby girls in pink blankets, placing them side by side in their mother's arms. No one could have guessed then how differently their lives would unfold. Growing up, the Martinez twins looked so alike that their parents tied different colored ribbons around their wrists until they were toddlers. Their mother dressed them in matching outfits for the first 5 years, delighting in how people couldn't tell them apart. But by first grade, differences began to surface that no matching outfit could hide. Isabella raised her hand first in class. She learned to read quickly, bringing home gold star stickers and beaming smiles from teachers. At home, she carefully arranged her stuffed animals and books before bed. When relatives visited, Isabella would perform little songs she had memorized, her voice clear and confident, while Isabel hung back, chewing her fingernails. "Look at how neat Isabella's homework is," their third-grade teacher told Mrs. Martinez during a parent conference, then lowered her voice. Isabel could learn a thing or two from her sister. Isabel heard these whispers all her life. She saw the slight disappointment in her father's eyes when he opened her report card. She noticed how family friends always asked about Isabella's achievements first. By middle school, the pattern was set. Isabella was the good twin, the smart twin, the special one. At 13, Isabella was elected class president, while Isabel got detention for skipping gym class. When Isabella won the science fair, Isabel hid in the bathroom during the award ceremony. Their bedroom became a tale of two worlds. Isabella's side with neatly stacked books and academic trophies, Isabel's with crumpled clothes and half-finished craft projects she abandoned out of frustration. "Why can't you try harder?" their mother would sigh, picking up Isabel's things. "Look at your sister's side of the room." In high school, the gap widened into a canyon. Isabella became captain of the debate team, maintained perfect grades, and started dating Paolo, the handsome son of their father's boss. Isabel cycled through friend groups, looking for somewhere to belong. She dyed her hair purple, then black, then back to match her sister's natural brown when nothing felt right. Their 18th birthday party told the whole story. The cake had both their names, but most of the gifts were books and college supplies for Isabella, who had been accepted to a prestigious university with a partial scholarship. Isabel had enrolled in community college after barely graduating. "To our amazing daughters," their father toasted, his arm around Isabella's shoulders. "Isabella, we're so proud of all you've accomplished." And Isabel, he paused, searching for words, "We love your creativity." Isabel smiled tightly and excused herself to the bathroom, where she stared at her reflection, the face so identical to her celebrated sister's. She touched the mirror, wondering what invisible difference made one twin shine while the other disappeared. After college, Isabella's star continued to rise. She landed a marketing job at a top firm in the city, while Isabel bounced between retail positions. Isabella bought a sleek apartment, while Isabel shared a cramped rental with two roommates who often forgot to pay their share of utilities. Isabella's social media documented business trips, promotions, and weekend getaways with Paolo, now her fiancé. Isabel scrolled through these posts late at night, studying her sister's perfect life with a mixture of longing and resentment. "Have you thought about going back to school?" Isabella asked during one of their increasingly rare coffee meetings. "The design program at my old college has scholarships." "Not everyone can be like you," Isabel replied, stirring her coffee too hard, splashing drops onto the table. Isabella reached across to dab the spill with a napkin. "I'm just trying to help." "I don't need your help," Isabel snapped, then immediately regretted it when hurt flashed across her sister's face. This was the problem. Isabella even made being kind look effortless. At night, Isabel started a strange ritual. She would practice Isabella's signature, mimic her laugh, try on clothes in the style her sister wore. She saved photos of Isabella's apartment from social media, studying the layout, imagining herself waking up there, being greeted by the doorman, kissing Paolo goodbye as she left for her important job. Just for fun, she told herself, though a darker thought lurked beneath. If they'd swapped places at birth, if she'd been the first one out, the first one named, the first one praised, would their lives be reversed? The annual Martinez family reunion was approaching, a gathering Isabel usually found a reason to miss. But this year, something pulled her toward it, a need to see everyone fawn over her sister's newest achievements. A need to feel the familiar pain that had become almost comforting in its consistency. She didn't yet know this reunion would change everything. That watching her perfect sister from across the room would finally push her from quiet resentment into something more dangerous. That for once, she would stop living in Isabella's shadow and instead try to become it. The Martinez family reunion was held at Uncle Roberto's sprawling backyard, where colorful paper lanterns hung from trees and the smell of grilled meat filled the air. Isabella arrived late on purpose, slipping in through the side gate while her mother was busy arranging food platters. She wore a simple black dress that made her feel invisible among the bright summer colors everyone else had chosen. Isabella, of course, stood out in a flowing blue sundress that matched her eyes perfectly. She was at the center of a small crowd, Paolo's arm draped casually around her waist. "There she is." Aunt Carmen spotted Isabel and waved her over. "Come see your sister's ring. It's gorgeous." Isabel forced a smile and joined the circle of relatives. Isabella brightened when she saw her twin. "Izzy, you made it." She reached out and squeezed Isabel's hand. "I was worried you wouldn't come." "Wouldn't miss it," Isabel lied, her eyes already drawn to the sparkling diamond on her sister's finger. It was elegant and understated, exactly what Isabella would have wanted. Paolo had good taste. "When's the wedding?" Uncle Roberto asked, refilling everyone's drinks. "Next spring," Isabella said. "We found the perfect venue, and they had a cancellation for April." "Of course they did," Isabel muttered under her breath. "What was that?" her cousin Lucia asked. "Nothing, just clearing my throat." Isabel reached for a glass of wine from a passing tray. She wasn't normally a drinker, but today she needed something to take the edge off. The afternoon dragged on like a slow torture. Isabel nursed her third glass of wine while watching Isabella effortlessly navigate from group to group, everyone eager to hear about her recent promotion. Senior marketing manager at only 26, Isabel overheard her father boasting to his brothers. "That's our Isabella. Always was the ambitious one." Isabel slipped away to the bathroom inside the house. She splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection. Same nose as Isabella, same eyes, same mouth. But somehow she looked tired, worn down, while her sister always seemed to glow. When she returned to the party, she found her cousin Miguel adjusting the music. He'd always been nice to her, maybe because he too lived in the shadow of a more successful sibling. "Having fun?" he asked, handing her a fresh glass of wine. "Oh, absolutely thrilling," she said, making him chuckle. They watched as Isabella was pulled into another conversation, this time about the important presentation she was preparing for work. "I've got a cabin booked up in the mountains next weekend," Isabella was telling Aunt Rosa. "Complete isolation so I can focus. This presentation could mean international clients for the company." Miguel shook his head. Always the overachiever, that one. "She's going alone?" Isabella asked, something stirring in the back of her mind. "Paolo has some medical conference," Miguel said with a shrug. "But you know Isabella, she likes her space when she's working." Isabel nodded slowly, taking a long sip of wine. 3 days alone in a cabin, no one expecting to hear from her. The thought that had been growing in her mind for years suddenly crystallized into something more concrete. The evening wore on, and relatives began to leave. Isabel was helping clear plates when her cousin Lucia cornered her by the recycling bins. "So, what are you up to these days, Isabel? Still at that clothing store?" "I'm between jobs actually," Isabel replied, crushing an empty can with more force than necessary. "That's too bad. Have you thought about asking Isabella for connections? I'm sure she knows people." Before Isabel could respond, another cousin joined them. "Isabella just told me she's buying a condo. Can you believe it? At our age. Why can't you be more like your sister?" Lucia said, not unkindly, but the words hit Isabel like a physical blow. She'd heard them too many times, from too many people, over too many years. Something inside her, something that had been bending for decades, finally snapped. "Excuse me," she mumbled, dropping the trash bag and walking away. She didn't say goodbye to anyone, not even her parents. She just got in her old car and drove, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. Back at her tiny apartment, Isabel kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto her bed. Her roommates were out, thankfully. She didn't want to explain her red eyes or trembling hands. She pulled out her phone and did what she always did when feeling low, checked Isabella's social media. A fresh post showed her sister and Paolo toasting with champagne at the family reunion. The caption read, "Celebrating with family before my big mountain getaway. 3 days of peace to nail this presentation. #blessed, #worklife, #cabin retreat." Isabel scrolled deeper, finding older posts about the cabin. Isabella had shared the booking confirmation weeks ago, Pinewood Cabin, off Highway 16, tucked into the mountainside. Isabella had even joked that there was barely any cell service, perfect for focusing without distractions. Isabel sat up, suddenly alert despite the wine clouding her thoughts. She opened her laptop and began searching for information about the cabin. It was remote, serviced by a management company that left keys in a lockbox. No staff on site. Next, she pulled up her sister's social media profile, studying it with new eyes. Not as a jealous twin, but as someone learning a role. Isabella's expressions, her phrases, how she posed in photos. Isabel had been unconsciously mimicking her sister for years, trying on her mannerisms like borrowed clothes, but never with purpose. Now, a plan was taking shape. A terrible, thrilling plan. She opened her closet and pushed aside her own clothes, revealing the back section where she kept the outfits she bought over the years, items identical to Isabella's. She'd told herself it was just because her sister had good taste, but deep down, she'd been preparing for something. This weekend, Isabel decided she wouldn't be the forgotten twin anymore. She wouldn't live in anyone's shadow. For 3 days, she could step into Isabella's perfect life. She could be the golden child, the successful one, the one everyone admired. She just needed to get to that cabin first. The winding mountain road stretched before Isabel as she drove toward Pinewood Cabin. The car radio crackled with static before losing signal completely. Perfect isolation, just as Isabella had wanted for her work retreat. Isabel checked her appearance in the rearview mirror. She'd spent hours getting ready. Her hair was now styled exactly like her sister's, with those caramel highlights Isabella had added last month. She'd practiced Isabella's smile, wider than her own, with slightly more teeth showing. Even her makeup was a perfect match, down to the peachy blush Isabella preferred. The overnight bag beside her contained carefully selected clothes that matched Isabella's style, fitted blazers, silk blouses, and tailored pants. Clothes that said successful and confident, not the baggy hoodies and worn jeans that filled Isabella's own closet. It had taken her less than a day to formulate her plan. She told her roommates she was visiting a friend for the weekend. She'd called in sick to her temporary job at the mall. No one would miss her for a few days. No one ever did. The cabin appeared around a bend nestled among tall pines. A quaint wooden structure with a wide front porch and large windows. Smoke curled from the chimney. Isabella was already there. Isabel's heart pounded as she parked beside her sister's sleek silver car. What was she doing here? The plan had seemed so clear last night, fueled by wine and decades of resentment. Now, in the clear mountain air, doubt crept in. She sat frozen in her car until the cabin door swung open. Isabella appeared on the porch, wrapped in a cardigan, confusion crossing her face as she recognized the beat-up car. "Izzy, is that you?" Too late to turn back. Isabel grabbed her bag and stepped out, forcing a smile. Surprise. Isabella hurried down the steps. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Isabel said, heart racing. When you mentioned this retreat at the reunion, I thought maybe you could use some help with your presentation. You know, like we used to do with school projects." Isabella's face softened. They hadn't worked together on anything since high school, when Isabel would help with creative aspects of Isabella's projects while Isabella handled the technical details. "That's actually really sweet," Isabella said, pulling her sister into a hug. "Come in, it's getting cold." Inside, the cabin was cozy and warm. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace. Papers and sticky notes covered the dining table where Isabella had been working. "I've made some progress, but I'm stuck on the visual elements," Isabella admitted, showing Isabel her laptop. "The data is solid, but it needs something to make it pop." Isabel set her bag down and looked at the presentation. This wasn't how she'd imagined things going. She'd expected to arrive after Isabella had left for a hike or something, giving her time to what? She hadn't fully thought it through. I can help with that, she found herself saying. I've been designing display windows at the store. I have a good eye for visuals. They worked side by side for hours, falling into an easy rhythm they hadn't shared in years. Isabella ordered pizza, and they ate cross-legged on the floor in front of the fire, reminiscing about childhood memories. Remember when we switched places in Mrs. Gonzalez's class? Isabella laughed. She never figured it out. That's because you got a B on my math test, Isabel said. She thought it was normal for me. Isabella's laugh faded. I'm sorry about that. I should have tried harder. It's fine. Ancient history. Isabel took a long sip of her wine, her third glass of the evening. The bottle had been in Isabella's bag, an expensive red she'd brought to celebrate finishing her presentation. As the night deepened, Isabella yawned. I think I'm going to make some tea before bed. Want some? Sure, Isabel said, watching as her sister filled the kettle and set it on the stove. The kitchen was separated from the living area by a breakfast bar. While Isabella's back was turned, searching for tea bags, Isabel's eyes fell on her sister's purse. The wallet inside would have Isabella's ID, credit cards, key card to her apartment building. The sleeping pills Isabel had brought were in her own purse, just a few taken from her roommate's prescription bottle. She told herself they were just in case she lost her nerve and needed help sleeping. But now, with the wine warming her blood and years of jealousy burning in her chest, another use came to mind. Found them, Isabella said, holding up 2 tea bags. Chamomile, okay? Perfect, Isabel replied, her voice surprisingly steady. When Isabella turned to check the kettle, Isabel quickly crushed a pill between her fingers and held the powder ready. The kettle whistled. Isabella poured 2 mugs of steaming water, dropped in the tea bags, and carried them to the coffee table. Let them steep for a bit. Isabel nodded, heart hammering against her ribs. They talked about Paolo, about the wedding plans, about Isabella's job. Normal sister talk that felt anything but normal with the powder burning a hole in Isabel's palm. I'm going to grab a sweater from my room, Isabella said, standing up. It's getting chilly. The moment her sister disappeared down the hallway, Isabel tipped the powder into one of the mugs and stirred quickly with a spoon from the pizza box. The tea was dark enough to hide any residue. When Isabella returned, wrapped in a fluffy cardigan, Isabel handed her the doctored mug. This one steeped longer. It's stronger. Thanks. Isabella sipped the tea, making a face. Bitter. Probably overbrewed, Isabel said, her mouth dry. They talked for another 20 minutes, Isabella's words gradually becoming slower, her eyelids growing heavy. I feel strange, she murmured eventually. Really tired all of a sudden. The mountain air, Isabel suggested, watching her sister's eyes flutter. Maybe I should. Isabella tried to stand but swayed on her feet. Isabel caught her before she fell, surprised by how light her twin felt in her arms. Or maybe it was adrenaline making her strong. Let's get you to bed, Isabel said, half carrying her sister down the hallway. Instead of the bedroom, however, she steered Isabella toward the door she'd noticed earlier, the one leading to the basement storage room. Laying her sister on the concrete floor was harder than she expected. Isabella murmured something, eyes opening briefly before closing again. Isabel worked quickly, arranging a sleeping bag she found on a shelf as a makeshift bed. She placed water bottles and some granola bars from the kitchen nearby. Enough for a few days, not cruel, just practical. Before closing the door, she looked down at her sleeping twin. They really were identical, perfect mirrors of each other. I'm sorry, she whispered, not sure if she meant it. I just need to know what it feels like, just for a little while. She locked the door with a key she'd spotted on a hook in the kitchen, then went to Isabella's suitcase. It was time to complete the transformation. Tomorrow, she would drive back to the city in Isabella's car, step into her sister's apartment, her sister's job, her sister's life. Just for 3 days, she told herself as she held up one of Isabella's silk blouses against her chest. Just long enough to know how it feels to be the golden child, the successful one, the one everyone loves. just long enough to be Isabella. Morning sunlight filtered through the windows of Isabella's sleek downtown apartment as Isabel woke in her sister's king-size bed. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The silky sheets felt strange against her skin, the room too spacious, too quiet without her roommate's chatter and the street noise she was used to. Then it all came rushing back. The cabin. The tea. Isabella locked in the storage room. Isabel's stomach twisted with guilt, but she pushed the feeling away. She'd left her sister with food, water, and a bathroom. Isabella would be uncomfortable but safe. This was just for a few days, just an experiment. She showered in Isabella's enormous rainfall shower, using her sister's expensive shampoo that smelled like citrus and jasmine. She blow-dried her hair the way Isabella did, letting it fall in soft waves around her shoulders. The makeup she applied was flawless, just enough to look professional, but not overdone. Opening the closet was like stepping into a high-end boutique. Isabel ran her fingers over the precisely organized rows of clothes, everything color-coordinated and perfectly pressed. She selected a navy blue dress with a subtle pattern and slipped it on, surprised at how well it fit. Of course it would. They were identical twins, after all. "You can do this," she told her reflection. She had practiced Isabella's signature smile, but graceful hand gestures, the way she tilted her head slightly when listening to someone. Years of watching her sister had made her an expert. The first real test came in the lobby. The doorman looked up as she approached, coffee tumbler in hand. "Good morning, Ms. Martinez. Big presentation today, right?" Isabel's heart skipped, but she smiled Isabella's smile. "That's right, Tony. Wish me luck." "You don't need luck," he chuckled. "You'll knock 'em dead like always." She almost stumbled at how easily he believed her. How readily he accepted her as Isabella without a second glance. The doorman had known her sister for years, yet couldn't tell the difference between them. The ride to Isabella's office building was nerve-wracking. Isabel had memorized the address and researched the company's floor plan from their website. Still, walking through those glass doors felt like stepping onto a stage without knowing the lines. A young man in a sharp suit spotted her immediately. "Isabella, thank goodness you're here." The client moved the meeting up to 10 o'clock. "What?" Isabel froze. The presentation wasn't supposed to be until tomorrow. She'd planned to use today to get comfortable in the office, to study more of Isabella's work files. I know. I tried to push back, but they're flying out tonight instead of tomorrow. Do you have the slides ready?" She nodded, clutching Isabella's laptop bag. Inside was the presentation they'd worked on together at the cabin before everything changed. At least she knew the content. She'd helped create it. The next 3 hours were a blur. Isabel was introduced to colleagues whose names she immediately forgot. She nodded and smiled and pretended to remember inside jokes. She followed the young man, Adam, she learned, into a sleek conference room where important-looking people waited. "Isabella will walk us through the campaign strategy," someone announced, and suddenly all eyes were on her. Isabel's hands trembled as she connected Isabella's laptop to the projector. A lifetime of being overlooked had not prepared her for this level of attention, but as the slides appeared on screen, something strange happened. The nervousness faded, replaced by a calm confidence she'd never felt before. These were her designs. Her ideas for visual elements that had impressed Isabella so much. For once, she wasn't pretending to be her sister. She was showing her own talent. "As you can see," she began, her voice steady, "our approach targets 3 key demographics simultaneously while maintaining brand cohesion." The words flowed easily. The room responded with nods and appreciative murmurs. When questions came, she answered them with insights born from years of retail experience, knowledge Isabella wouldn't have had. "Brilliant perspective," the client's CEO commented. "I never considered the in-store display alignment with digital marketing. That's the kind of integrated thinking we need." By the end of the presentation, the clients were smiling, her colleagues were passing her congratulatory notes, and Isabel felt a rush unlike anything she'd ever experienced. She had done it. Not just passed as Isabella, but excelled as herself. The rest of the day was easier. She attended meetings, signed documents with Isabella's practiced signature, and fielded congratulations about her engagement. When someone mentioned Paolo, her smile tightened slightly, but she deflected with talk of the presentation's success. At 6 o'clock, she gathered her things and headed for the elevator, exhausted but exhilarated. "Isabella," Adam called, catching up with her. "A bunch of us are heading to Riverdale Tavern to celebrate. You coming?" Isabel hesitated. This hadn't been part of the plan. What would Isabella do? I should probably get home. Lots to process after today. Adam looked disappointed. Paolo said he's tied up at the hospital until late anyway. Come on, just one drink. You deserve it after saving that account. The mention of Paolo sent a jolt of anxiety through her. She hadn't considered that her sister's fiancé might try to contact her. She would need to be careful. One drink, she agreed, deciding that going along would raise fewer questions than refusing. The tavern was upscale and lively, with soft jazz playing and wall sconces casting a warm glow. Isabel sat among Isabella's colleagues, amazed at how they included her in conversations, valued her opinions, laughed at her comments. Is this how it always was for her sister? This constant validation. 3 hours and 2 glasses of wine later, her phone buzzed with Paolo's name on the screen. Isabel excused herself and stepped outside to answer, heart racing. "Hey," she said, trying to sound natural. "There's my star." Paolo's voice was warm, tired. "Adam texted me about your presentation. Congratulations, babe." "Thanks." She kept it brief, unsure how Isabella and Paolo typically spoke to each other. "I'm just finishing up here. Want me to come over?" Panic flared in Isabel's chest. This was a complication she hadn't prepared for. "Actually, I'm exhausted. Rain check till tomorrow?" A pause. "Everything okay? You sound strange." "Just tired, and maybe coming down with something. I should probably rest alone tonight." Another pause, longer this time. "If you're sure. I love you." The words hung in the air, demanding a response. Words Isabel had never spoken to anyone but family, and even then rarely. "Love you too," she managed, the phrase feeling foreign on her tongue. "Good night." She hung up and leaned against the cool brick wall, heart pounding. She had feared that fooling Paolo would be the hardest part, and she was right. How could she pretend to be in love with her sister's fiancé? How far was she willing to take this charade? But as she looked back through the window at the group of colleagues laughing together, at the life that could be hers if she were Isabella, she knew she wasn't ready to give it up. Not yet. Just 2 more days, she told herself. 2 more days of being valued, admired, respected. 2 more days of being the person everyone wanted her to be. 2 more days of being Isabella. Sophia drummed her fingers on the table of the small cafe where she always met Isabella for Tuesday lunch. She checked her watch again, 12:20. Isabella was never late, not for anything, and especially not for their weekly catch-up. She had texted 3 times with no response. "More coffee?" The waitress paused at her table. "No thanks. I'll wait a bit longer for my friend." Sophia scrolled through her messages. The last text from Isabella had been yesterday, a short response to Sophia's question about weekend plans. "Super busy with work this week. Talk later." It wasn't just the missed lunch that bothered Sophia. Isabella's texts had been different the past 2 days, shorter, with none of the inside jokes or emojis they usually shared. When Sophia had sent a meme about their favorite TV show, Isabella had simply replied "lol" instead of their usual detailed analysis. Something was off. Meanwhile, in the mountain cabin, Isabella was working on her 3rd escape attempt. The first had failed when she discovered the storage room's only window was too small for even her slender frame. The second attempt, shouting for help, had proven useless. The cabin was too isolated. Now she was methodically testing every inch of the locked door, looking for weaknesses. The splitting headache from the drugged tea had finally subsided, leaving rage and disbelief in its place. Her own twin sister had done this. Her own twin was out there somewhere, pretending to be her. A paperclip from the work materials she brought to the cabin had become her new best friend. Isabella bent it carefully, the way she'd seen in a thriller movie, and worked it into the old lock. "Come on," she whispered, sweat beading on her forehead despite the basement chill. "Come on." Back in the city, Isabel was discovering that being Isabella wasn't as simple as she'd thought. The second day had brought new challenges. A colleague stopped by her desk to ask about the Hansen account numbers from last month's report, and Isabel had no idea what he was talking about. She'd fumbled through a response about checking her files and getting back to him. Then there was Paolo's invitation to dinner that evening. She'd managed to postpone with a claim about a deadline, but he was getting suspicious. This morning, he called rather than texted, asking pointed questions about why she hadn't responded to his email about wedding venue options. "You know how important this is to me," he'd said, his voice tinged with hurt. "We agreed to make the deposit this week." "I know, I'm sorry," she'd replied, trying to sound like her perfectionist sister. "I just want to be sure it's exactly right." Now, sitting at Isabella's desk, Isabel rubbed her temples. The office around her hummed with activity, but she felt increasingly isolated. Playing a role was exhausting. Every conversation was a potential trap, every interaction a chance to be discovered. Her phone chimed with a text from Sophia. "Missed you at lunch. Everything ok? Not like you to no-show. Call me." Isabel swallowed hard. She'd completely forgotten about Isabella's standing lunch date with her best friend. It was the kind of detail that would give her away. Isabella would never miss meeting Sophia. Never. She typed a quick reply. "So sorry. Crazy deadline. Make it up to you soon." Sophia's response came immediately. "Since when do you use exclamation points? You hate them." Isabel froze. Such a tiny detail, but so revealing. She didn't know how to respond. Her phone rang, Sophia calling. Isabel declined the call and tried to think. She needed a better excuse, something that would keep Sophia at bay for a few more days until she could return to the cabin and free Isabella. Before she could formulate a plan, Adam appeared at her desk. "Isabella, the Westridge team is asking about those market projections. Did you get my email?" "Yes, working on it now," she lied. "Great. Oh, and your sister called the main line looking for you. Said you weren't answering your cell." The blood drained from Isabel's face. "My sister?" "Yeah, Isabel, right? Said it was important. I told her you were in meetings all afternoon." Isabel's hands turned ice cold. It wasn't possible. Isabella was locked in the cabin storage room with no phone. Unless, in the mountains, Isabella felt the lock finally give way with a soft click. Her hands were bleeding from where the paperclip had slipped repeatedly, but triumph surged through her. She pushed the door open and stepped out into the main cabin, squinting in the bright light after days in the dim storage room. Her first move was to search for her phone, but it was gone, along with her purse, car keys, and laptop. Isabel had taken everything. Isabella ran to the landline, but of course it was dead. The cabin was too remote for reliable service. She looked out the window at the empty driveway where her car had been. The nearest main road was 5 miles away. There was no choice. She had to walk and hope someone would drive by. After splashing water on her face and changing into clothes that weren't wrinkled from days of wear, Isabella began the long hike down the mountain road. Her legs were wobbly from confinement and hunger gnawed at her stomach. The granola bars Isabella had left weren't enough for 3 days. 2 hours later, exhausted and thirsty, she finally reached the highway. 20 minutes passed before a pickup truck approached. Isabella waved her arms frantically, relief washing over her when the truck slowed to a stop. "You okay, miss?" An older man peered out the window. "No," Isabella said, her voice raspy. "I need help. My car broke down at a cabin up the mountain and I don't have my phone." He hesitated, clearly assessing whether she was trouble. "Please," she added. "I need to get back to the city. It's an emergency." "Where are you headed?" "Downtown. But actually, can you take me to this address instead?" She gave Sophia's address. Her own apartment would be too dangerous. Isabel might be there. But Sophia would help her, would believe her when she explained what happened. Meanwhile, Sophia was growing more concerned. She'd known Isabella since college, and this behavior wasn't just unusual, it was unthinkable. Isabella was meticulous about commitments and prompt with communication, and the exclamation points. Isabella had once given Sophia a 10-minute lecture on the overuse of exclamation points in professional communication. Sophia pulled up her text chain with Isabel, the real Isabel, and sent a message. "Hey, have you talked to your sister recently? She's acting weird." She waited, but no reply came. That was less surprising. Isabel was notoriously bad at responding to texts. The twins were opposites in so many ways. Sophia scrolled back through her recent photos, finding one from last Friday, Isabella and Paolo at dinner with Sophia and her boyfriend. Isabella looked exactly like herself, laughing at something Paolo had said, her hand resting on his arm. Then Sophia remembered something. She'd taken a photo of Isabella yesterday at the office, a quick snap through the glass walls of the conference room while waiting to meet for lunch. She'd been planning to tease Isabella about how serious she looked during presentations. Sophia pulled up the image and zoomed in. At first glance, it was just Isabella in a navy dress, pointing at a slide. But looking closer, Sophia noticed something off about her posture, the way she held her hands. Isabella always stood with perfect posture, hands graceful, head high. This woman stood with a slight curve to her shoulders, hands clenched more tightly around the pointer. A cold feeling settled in Sophia's stomach. She'd known the twins since college. She'd seen them together enough to notice the tiny differences most people missed. The way Isabel bit her lower lip when concentrating, the way she stood with her weight on one leg instead of balanced like Isabella. The woman in the photo wasn't Isabella. "Oh my God," Sophia whispered as pieces began to fall into place. The different texting style, the missed lunch, the strange behavior Paolo had mentioned. Her doorbell rang, making her jump. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, she found a disheveled, exhausted Isabella standing in her hallway. "Sophia," Isabella croaked, tears welling in her eyes. "It's Isabel. She's pretending to be me." Sophia pulled her friend inside, her suspicions confirmed in the worst possible way. "I know," she said. "I was just figuring it out. Tell me everything." Isabella stood in Sophia's shower, letting the hot water wash away the grime of her ordeal. Her friend had insisted she clean up before they did anything else. The borrowed clothes, soft sweatpants, and an oversized t-shirt felt like heaven after days in the same outfit. When she emerged, Sophia had prepared a meal of scrambled eggs, toast, and fruit. Isabella ate ravenously while they formed a plan. "We should call the police," Sophia insisted, refilling Isabella's water glass. Isabella shook her head, still chewing. "Not yet. I need to confront her myself." "Are you crazy? She drugged you and locked you in a basement." "She's my sister," Isabella said quietly. "My twin. There's more going on here than you know." Sophia's expression softened. "Tell me then." Isabella set down her fork, the weight of realization heavy on her shoulders. "This is my fault too. I've been so focused on my own life that I never saw how much she was hurting, how much I was hurting her just by being me. That doesn't excuse what she did." "No," Isabella agreed. "But I understand it. And I need to end this myself. Will you help me?" Sophia sighed. "What's your plan?" 20 minutes later, they were in Sophia's car, heading toward Isabella's apartment. It was nearly 7 in the evening, and Paolo had texted Isabella earlier to say he'd be stopping by around 8 with takeout. They needed to get there first. "When we confront her, let me handle it," Isabella said, staring out the window at the city lights. "She's fragile right now, even if she doesn't seem it." Sophia glanced at her friend. "You've always protected her, haven't you? Even now?" Isabella didn't respond. The truth was complicated. She'd spent a lifetime being praised while Isabel was overlooked. She'd known it was happening but had been too young, too caught up in her own achievements to recognize the damage it was causing. By the time she understood, the pattern was set. Their roles had been fixed since childhood. Isabella the star, Isabel the shadow. They arrived at Isabella's building, nodding to the doorman who did a double take at seeing Isabella in casual clothes. "Ms. Martinez? Didn't you just go up a few minutes ago?" Isabella's heart raced. "My sister is visiting." The doorman's confused expression confirmed what they already knew. Isabel was upstairs. In the elevator, Isabella's hands trembled slightly. "I don't even know what to say to her." "You'll find the words," Sophia reassured her. "You always do." The elevator doors opened on Isabella's floor. They walked silently to apartment 1107, where Isabella hesitated. This was her home, but for the first time, she felt like an intruder. She took out the spare key she'd given Sophia for emergencies and unlocked the door. The apartment was lit by soft lamps. Music played from the bedroom, Isabella's favorite playlist. In the kitchen, wine was breathing in a decanter. 2 glasses stood ready. "Isabel?" Isabella called out, her voice echoing strangely in her own apartment. Movement from the bedroom. Then Isabel appeared in the hallway, freezing at the sight of her sister. She wore Isabella's favorite black dress, her hair styled in Isabella's signature waves, lips painted with Isabella's trademark berry lipstick. For a moment, the twins stared at each other, perfect reflections distorted by circumstance. "How did you get out?" Isabel finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Paperclip," Isabella replied, holding up her still raw fingertips. "From my presentation note." Isabel's face hardened. "You don't understand what it's like. You've never understood." "Then tell me," Isabella shouted back. "Make me understand why my own sister would do this to me." The front door opened behind them. Paolo walked in with bags of takeout, stopping short at the sight of the identical women facing off. "Isabella?" He looked between them, confusion flooding his face. "What's going on? Why are there 2 of you?" "That's what I'd like to know," Isabella said coldly, not taking her eyes off her sister. Paolo set down the food, approaching cautiously. "Which one of you is Isabella, my Isabella?" Isabel's composure cracked. "I could have been, if I'd been born first, if I'd been given the chances you had, if I hadn't always been Isabella's sister instead of just Isabel." "Test us," Isabella said to Paolo, finally looking at him. "Ask something only I would know." Paolo hesitated, then nodded. "Where did I propose?" Isabel's face fell. This was a detail she couldn't have researched, couldn't have found on social media. "On the ferry to Lopez Island," Isabella answered. "During that thunderstorm last July. You said you couldn't wait any longer even though your original plan was to do it at sunset on the beach." Paolo moved to stand beside Isabella, his choice made. Isabel backed away, bumping into the wall. "It's over, Isabel," Sophia said gently. "You need help." "Help?" Isabel laughed bitterly. "I've been helping myself for once. Do you know what it's like at work now? They respect me, respect what I can do. I saved that presentation. I made it better than Isabella would have." "That's not true," Paolo began, but Isabella held up a hand to stop him. "Actually, it might be," she said quietly. "The designs in my slides, they were Isabella's ideas. We worked on them together at the cabin before everything went wrong." Isabel stared at her sister. "What? You've always been more creative than me. Better with visuals. Better with people too, if you'd ever given yourself the chance." Isabella took a step toward her twin. "But this isn't the way, Izzy. You can't become me to find yourself." Something broke in Isabel then. The careful mask she'd constructed shattered, and behind it was just hurt, decades of accumulating pain. "What else was I supposed to do?" she sobbed, sliding down the wall to sit on the floor. "Everyone loves you. Mom, Dad, your friends, your fiancé. You have everything. And I'm nothing." Isabella knelt in front of her sister. For the first time, she truly saw the damage that had been done, not just by Isabel's actions, but by their parents' favoritism, by teachers' comparisons, by society's preference for the type of success Isabella represented. "You're not nothing," Isabella whispered. "You're my sister, my other half. And I'm so sorry I didn't see how much you were hurting." Paolo edged toward the phone. "I should call the police," he murmured to Sophia. "Not yet," Sophia replied, watching the sisters. "Let them finish this first." Isabel looked up, mascara streaking down her face. "I'm in trouble, aren't I? Real trouble this time." Isabella nodded slowly. "Yes, but you're not alone. I'll be there with you through whatever comes next. I promise." "Why would you help me after what I did?" "Because that's what sisters do," Isabella said, offering her hand to her twin. "And we've both failed at that for too long." Isabel hesitated, then took the offered hand. In that gesture, something shifted between them, not forgiveness, not yet, but a recognition. A beginning. Paolo picked up the phone, his expression grim but resolute. "I'm calling the police now." Isabella nodded, not letting go of her sister's hand. "It's going to be hard, Izzy, but we'll face it together. The way we should have faced everything." As Paolo dialed, the twins sat side by side against the wall, identical tear-streaked faces turned toward an uncertain future, but for the first time in years, neither one was facing it alone. The judge's gavel came down hard, echoing through the courtroom. Isabel stood with her head bowed as the sentence was announced. 5 years in prison. Her parents wept quietly in the back row. Isabella sat stiff-backed, her eyes never leaving her twin sister as officers led her away. "Wait," Isabella called out, rushing forward. The guards paused. For a moment, the identical sisters faced each other, one in handcuffs, one free. "I'll visit you," Isabella whispered. "I promise." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you?" "After what I did." "Because you're my sister, my twin. We came into this world together." As Isabel was led away, Isabella turned to the district attorney. "I want to request something. My sister needs help, real help, not just punishment." The first prison visit was awkward. The sisters sat across from each other, separated by a table in the visitation room. Isabel wore a baggy orange jumpsuit that hung from her thinning frame. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Mom and Dad send their love," Isabella said. Isabel snorted. "No, they don't." "They do. They're confused and hurt, but they love you." "They love you. They tolerate me." Isabella reached across the table, ignoring the guard's warning glance. "That's not true. And I never knew you felt that way. I should have seen it." Week by week, the visits continued. Sometimes they sat in silence. Sometimes they argued. But they kept showing up. 3 months in, their parents joined them. Their father broke down crying, something the twins had never seen before. "I failed you," he told Isabel. "I didn't see how much you were hurting." In the prison's therapy program, Isabel finally spoke about growing up as the other twin. About teacher after teacher comparing her work to Isabella's. About boys asking her out only to quiz her about her sister. About feeling like a walking disappointment. Isabella had her own therapy sessions outside. She brought journals to their visits, sharing her own discoveries. "I was so focused on being perfect that I never noticed what it was doing to you," she admitted. "I competed with you too, just in different ways." During her second year in prison, Isabel discovered the art program. Her drawings captured the attention of the instructor, who encouraged her to apply for the graphic design correspondence course. For the first time, Isabel found something that was hers alone. Isabella had never been artistic. When Isabel showed her first design portfolio during a visit, Isabella beamed with genuine admiration. "This is amazing. I could never do this." Isabel looked up, startled. "Really? You're not just saying that?" "I'm serious. I can't even draw stick figures right." They both laughed, a real laugh they hadn't shared since childhood. Due to good behavior and the support of her family, Isabel was released after 3 years. Isabel was waiting outside the prison gates alone. "Where's Mom and Dad?" Isabel asked, clutching her small bag of belongings. "I wanted to pick you up myself," Isabella said. "I have something to show you." She drove them to a small studio apartment above a coffee shop. "It's yours if you want it. First month's rent is paid. The coffee shop downstairs needs a social media designer." I showed them your portfolio. They're impressed. Isabel stood in the center of the apartment, her apartment, turning slowly. "You did this for me? Why?" "Because I want you to have your own life, not mine. Not a copy of mine. Your life." 2 months later, Isabel designed the wedding invitations for Isabella and Marco's long-delayed ceremony. At the wedding, the sisters stood side by side in different dresses, Isabella in white, Isabel in deep green that matched her eyes. When guests confused them, they laughed together at the shared joke instead of competing for recognition. During the reception, a distant aunt approached them. "I still can't tell you two apart," she admitted. Isabel smiled. "That's okay. For the first time, I can." As the evening ended, the twins found themselves alone on the venue's balcony. "Are you happy?" Isabella asked. Isabel looked at her sister, then out at the night sky. "I'm getting there. I'm finally figuring out who Isabel is without comparing her to Isabella." "I like her," Isabella said. "Isabel. She's creative and strong and survived something terrible." "She had help," Isabel replied, squeezing her sister's hand. The shocking truth wasn't the deception or the crime. It was that they needed to break apart completely before they could finally become sisters instead of rivals.